Hey, and welcome to the Izzy Chinche Show.
Your environment is such a huge contributor to your habits, your behaviors, both positively and negatively, right? So that's kind of the first big principle that shifting environment signals to us in our brains that something needs to be different.
I am so pumped that you tuned in. My goal with the show is to inspire and motivate you to the best of my abilities. I believe our world needs more leaders, and I believe that you, my listener, are a leader, and that you have the opportunity to impact your community and family by simply being you. I truly am here to try and serve and offer value to your life. And if you enjoy the show, it would mean the most to me if you could please either rate, subscribe, or share the show with anyone who you think might benefit from listening. Together, we can make this world a better place. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you love today's episode.
Michael, welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're going to be here.
Thank you, Izzy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm bummed we're not in person today, but that's all right.
Yeah, that's okay. We do this a lot now, so it's all good.
Exactly. We're flexible. Well, I'm super excited to have you on. I got a bunch of questions, but I would love for you to introduce yourself so the audience gets to know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, I'm Michael Lopez. Describe myself as a coach. I am a coach and consultant. What that means is I coach leaders and teams and organizations really on how to change. And it's funny, last night I was watching some football games out with some friends, my brother-in-law, and somebody asked me what I do, and I was like, I help people change. I help people perform. So whether it's a 15-year-old athlete or a 60-year-old executive, my job is to help you get better in some way. And I've just recently, after working in big consulting for years, have gone out on my own, and it's just a great time to bring my purpose and passion together. And so here I am talking to you, and
I love
how we got connected was a funny story in and of itself. So that's
Yes. I love that. So are you working mainly remote with people, or are you working in person, or how?
no, I do both. I'm out here in Nashville, not with you, but in a hotel room close by. I was in Mississippi last week. One of my big clients is out that way, and so I've really enjoyed being in person. I'll do stuff remote. I think being in person is more effective, running big sessions, having good conversations in person. But I do about a week on, week off. It's not too bad.
Okay, nice. Wow. So I didn't realize that. So you're actually flying out to then coach.
Yeah. So one of my big clients right now is a power company. So I spend a lot of time at big power plants, which is fun. So yeah, that's hard to do remotely.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. Well, I'm actually really interested in that. So what does that even look like when you go in to work with a company of that like that size? I don't even know where that would start.
Yeah,
I'm so interested.
it's it really depends on I've worked with a lot of big companies. I've worked with smaller companies. It's really a function of the kind of team that you're with. So if there's about 800 people at a power plant, you can't work with all of them at once. And
Yeah.
so we'll break them up into cohorts of 40 to 50 people and put them through a program, which is sort of big workshops, homework, like intermittent team sessions, coaching sessions, peer-to-peer sessions. So you've got to get creative with how you scale something like that out. But one of my big observations over the years, having grown up in the world of change management, which is where this whole thing
Yeah.
started, is change at scale doesn't really work. You can't change 1,000 people at once.
Mm.
It just doesn't work that way. And so you have to spend time with people, coach them, guide them, mentor them, shift and adjust. So we'll come up with multi-month programs to eventually get to everyone, but it takes time.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. I think about just working with a team alone feels like a lot, but
Right,
company,
right.
that's a whole other level of work. But I love that because that's needed. All right, so I got a couple questions for you. First one is, can you share a defining moment in your career that led you to specialize in performance transformation for companies and individuals?
Yeah, it's funny. As I was getting ready for this, it's a great question, and I wish I had a story of some big dramatic moment.
Yeah.
And what it is, and I think this is true of change for a lot of people, is that change sort of happens slowly and then all at once. It's a great phrase of mine, right? And you, as an athlete, I coach athletes, you know that the amount of time you put in and repetitions you put in incrementally then build up to some big moment, right? The NFL playoffs are on last night, everyone's watching, right? We see a small snippet of performance that was months and years of time before
Yeah.
that. So I can think back to hundreds of little moments where in the world of kind of professional change management, I was looking around going like this doesn't work, right? This is not something that's effective. And I mean, there is one story, it's not a big one, but it's more of an inflection point where so I just started my time at EY, great company. We were putting in an ERP system, so financial office back office systems. It's a, big companies do this all the time. And there was this big process involved with training and getting everyone ready, and you got to get your account and you go to this day-long class. And I'm sitting in this room with 40 other people, and here's what happens, right? We all sit on our computers, somebody's teaching, four people over there are doing email, three people are stepping out to take a call, five people are actually talking about something else, working on a proposal, right? We're not in the moment. And so there's this expectation that you're getting ready for some experience, and then people aren't paying attention. And I just remember looking around the room and sort of in slow motion, like as an athlete, you have this slow-mo camera, right, in your head going like, what are we doing? Like nobody here is paying attention. It was another 4 months before the system even went live. And so I just remember thinking every person in this room, myself included, is going to forget what we just did and have to start all over again. And I was like, we're not, it's sort of funny. It's this innocuous little story, but I just remember thinking to myself, we are not teaching people to learn in the way that adult humans need to learn. And so that really started a journey that then has gone on for the last 5 years to where I've gotten really excited about the neuroscience of how do people change, right? Like really change. And
Yeah.
so here I am now doing that for companies every day.
Okay, that's amazing. What does that change look like? You said the what is the neuroscience behind that? I have no idea, but I'm very
Yeah,
fascinated. Yeah, I want to hear about it.
yeah. So it's deep and it's a lot. I am not a trained physician. I've really only accessed things that are available online. I mean, all this information, if you ever listen to Andrew Huberman,
Yeah.
he's the best, right? And so it's so fascinating. I listened to his first episode and I remember thinking, and I've listened to all of them going, why aren't we doing these things, right? So the last 4 years, my research, or I guess my accumulation of experience, it's really around six big things. And this is on my website if folks ever want to go look at it. It's sort of easy to find. But there is a formula for how to change, but it's not formulaic, which means the way
Mhm.
you combine these six principles may be a little bit different for you than they are for me based on, age, experience, what you're working on, what you're trying to change. But the first one is shifting the environment. So again, as an athlete, you know this, but your environment is such a huge contributor to your habits, your behaviors, both positively and negatively, right? James Clear wrote Atomic Habits, which is really kind of all about this. So that's kind of the first big principle that shifting environment signals to us in our brains that something needs to be different. Um, the second big principle is really around how we shift from thinking about being ready to just getting started, right? We
Oh,
have a lot of things around how motivation is created or not in our bodies, and we all know that we're excited to start something. The middle is very difficult, the end is a bit more energizing, but we often try to get ready to start and instead of just starting. So it's this idea of how do we initiate movement, and there's a whole set of biological systems around that. The other one, or the third one, and again, you're really well aware of this, is how we embrace stress towards positive outcomes, right? So we think about stress as a debilitating thing, but the human body was designed under stress, right? We perform under stress. Stress is hugely important for how we actually perform. And we have to think differently about how we embrace that, right? Some people call it a growth mindset, which is this idea and there's been a ton of books on this as well, but that's sort of the big piece of this idea that stress is good for you if you know how to channel it. Um, The other piece is around the kind of fourth one is around creating focus. So one of the things we struggle with as adults is adult learning is very difficult, very different, excuse me, than when we learn as a kid, right? So it's why you should teach your kids foreign languages when they're young, because your brain actually learns differently than it does as an adult. And we need intentional, directed focus on an activity like that story I told where no one was paying attention, right? You're not going to learn anything if
Yeah.
I'm not paying attention to that. Um, the last two are around generating repetitions. So we are creatures of habit in the sense that when we repeat an action physically and behaviorally, as again, you coach this every day, right? You want to turn off the thought process of performing certain actions to free up space to do different actions. And so people don't think about behavior the same way, right? If I want to become empathetic, I have to practice being empathetic over and over and over again. It's not just, about doing squats, right? Squats build your legs, empathy builds that skill, right? So you have to think about it. And then the last big piece is really around how we reward progress. And there's a great Huberman Lab episode on this about measuring verbs instead of nouns. And so if I were to go back to the story of this company I was with, right? We put in an ERP system because we want to save $50 million, but you don't save $50 million in one day, right? You don't lose 30 pounds in one workout. You don't win the Super Bowl in one day. And so, but the challenge is we tend to measure outcomes instead of measuring inputs, right? How many times do I take an action? And so it's much easier for me to measure, I want to run 3 days a week for 20 minutes instead of I want to lose 15 pounds, right? This
Yeah.
is this is the time of resolutions, right? So and it's just a huge mistake because people get really frustrated with the lack of progress. But if I'm measuring verbs and thinking about how I'm applying inputs, then I can keep myself on that track. Sorry, that was long, but you asked about the
Did-
6 principles. So there you go.
No, that was so good. I think there was so much value in that. I feel like that more people need to hear that. And to your point, I mean, something I say to my athletes often is, energy is not a noun, it's a verb, right?
Right.
It's not something we have, it's something we do.
That's right.
And that shift in itself is powerful. It's so powerful. So
Yeah.
I'm especially loving this. I'm learning, and I think it's the stress point also.
Yeah.
Like I try and, manage my relationship with stress and kind of, think about where is my relationship with stress? Is
Right.
it, as soon as stress comes on, I'm like, oh, I'm stressed out, this is bad, or I'm like, no, this is good, I'm being pushed.
Right.
And, I think there's give and take, because I think if we do something for too long, then we live in a state of stress.
Right.
And for me, that was very negative. I think I did that for a long time, and then I went
Yeah.
far the other way. I was like, I never want to be stressed. I'm like, well, if I'm never stressed, I'm not growing.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, bones grow under stress, muscles grow under stress, right? Like, and there's this really great relationship between focus and stress, right? I mean, stress is just your body's physiological reaction to driving an action and creating some sort of movement on your part. So stress is important, right? It's the fight or flight experience. But we have, I think, I don't want to overgeneralize, but
Yeah.
we tend to think, oh, I'm having a response, that must be bad. No, that's really good, right? But you've got to focus that response into something that's really important, right? And so it's really so I'm a cold shower guy. I do this all the time, and it's miserable, right? And
Yeah,
it is
it is.
not the best experience in the world, but it actually trains your body to embrace stress in a sense that like this feels bad, but I'm going to be okay, right? And
Yeah.
so again, athletes are a great example of this. We talk about these big moments, right? These big plays, the world's looking at you, everything's happening. But if you can train yourself to be calm in those experiences, and work is no different, right? If you've ever had a challenging conversation with someone, if someone has ever had an interaction with you at work that's been frustrating and you're having a reaction, you can choose not to become angry. It doesn't mean you're not having the experience of anger, but you can choose to have a different response. And so it's funny because you sort of asked like, why do I do this? Is I realized all the things I was teaching athletes, I should be teaching people at work, right? It's the same idea.
I love that. Yes. Something I was actually talking to an athlete the other day about, and she said, I'm scared. And I said, you are not scared. You have a feeling of being scared.
That's right.
And it's such a shift. And she's like, "What? I don't get it." And I said, "Do you say it again?" I said, "Understand the difference. Are you
Right.
scared? Is that how you're going to identify, or is that a feeling that you have right now?"
Right.
And
Right.
I mean, that helps me constantly. I'm like, okay, is that my whole identity? Is my whole identity that I am nervous to do this, or
Yeah.
anxious about this? No, I have that feeling. I can
Right.
acknowledge it. That's not my whole identity, though.
Right. That's right. There's a great, you just brought that up. It sort of take me down another rabbit hole of, so there's a research scientist. Her name is Lisa Feldman Barrett, and she is sort of the leading expert on emotions. And I was listening to, she's got a new book out. It's called How Emotions Are Made. And again, we talk about shifts, and it's a shift that happened for me, which is this idea that we tend to think I have an emotion, then I have a response to that emotion, but it's actually the other way around,
Okay.
which is your brain is a prediction machine, right? So your brain is constantly trying to anticipate what's going to happen next. And it does that based on your past experience. And so I'm scared in a moment because my brain doesn't have any information for what's about to happen. And so it's predicting an outcome, which is usually not helpful,
Yeah.
right? Or accurate. And then that actually triggers my emotion. It's not the other way around. And it sort of blew my mind because I was like, wow, you can actually control that then. You can have some domain over the idea that, yeah, well said. I'm having the experience of being scared, but I'm not scared. I just don't know what's about to happen. And that's a huge mental shift in embracing stress. I recommend the book to anyone. It's
Okay, yeah.
really, really cool.
So are you a big reader? Do you read often,
I
or?
am a big listener.
Okay.
I don't get a lot of time to just sit and read, but I listen to podcasts when I exercise and when I travel, and those are two great places because I actually find it's hard for me to focus. Back to this conversation of I have my own distractions like everyone else,
Yeah.
and it's hard for me sometimes to sort of channel that. So, but when I'm exercising, like particularly when I run like once a week, kind of a big run, and that's a great time because you just can't think about anything else, right? Or I'm on a plane and nobody can email me, so I can just listen and I'll take notes on my phone and stuff like that. So, yeah, I haven't read physically a book in quite a while,
Okay.
but I've listened to probably 50 in the last,
Okay.
3 years. So,
Okay, I love that. You're a big learner. So you said that you haven't done a bunch of schooling around this, but you've like self-taught. Is that where you were?
yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly like the neuroscience principles of what happens to us. There's a lot of science behind there that I certainly am not qualified to get down at in the base level, but there's so much information available
Yeah.
nowadays. And again, I really do think the Huberman Lab podcast has changed people's access to understanding like
Yeah.
how science plays a role in your life and how your body is a complicated, wonderful, fascinating thing that you have some ability to understand at a deeper level. And so yeah, so between that and just like my experience coaching athletes and coaching leaders, you start to learn like how do people respond to certain stimulus, what works, what doesn't. And then when you match that with what's available from a research perspective, that's all out there. I mean, anyone can Google every research study that's available. You just have to go read it, right? And so it's been a huge source of learning for me, and it's made me a more effective coach on so many levels. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. What's kind of so you've been doing this kind of coaching on your own for, you said, 3 years?
So let's see, I would say I've been in the world of change for a long time.
Yeah, okay.
I'd say starting about 4 years ago, I sort of branched out into this idea of kind of disrupting the traditional change management industry. There's a lot of professionalized change management certifications and programs, and they're all very good. I'm not here to poke holes in them. They serve a purpose, but I have some beef with some of the structures in the sense that I don't think that people aren't linear, and a lot of those methodologies tend to operate in a linear fashion. And so for me, it was this idea of how do I take the foundation of what those professional organizations were building, but infuse in it a much deeper sense of like, how do people really work? And again, one of the things that I disagree with, maybe is the only way to say it, is a lot of that change management, they would talk about change at scale, right? We're going to change thousands of people at once. And I was like, that's not how it works, right? Change is a very personal, very local experience that everyone goes through at a different rate, at a different point in time. It requires feedback and mentoring and coaching and guidance and repetition and failure and all these things. And I can't just go to a 30-minute training class and then be different, right? No, that's never happened ever, right? So I've just tried to advance the ball in that conversation, and it's a journey.
I love that. Yeah, I think especially big corporations need that. And I worked in corporate for a very short amount of time. It wasn't it wasn't a good fit for me, but I
Yeah,
remember seeing things like immediately that were ineffective and trying and with there was a good motive, like they were trying
right,
to create change, and I was like, that's not going to work just because I know for work, like you said, working with athletes. I know
right,
just people
right,
we have it down working with athletes, certain systems because we know it works and that's what you have to do in order
right,
to create change. And I think one of the biggest pieces to, creating change in a team environment is buy-in. You have
right.
to have buy-in. And so, this corporation, they're trying to come in and create this change. And I was like, this will never work because you already don't have buy-in. Exactly what you
Yeah,
said. People weren't focused. They're not paying attention. I was like, if you don't have the initial buy-in, you
right.
will not be successful in creating change. Period.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
hard, but it's just a fact. And it's like
yeah.
creating that buy-in is key. Have you noticed that in corporations that you've
Yeah,
worked?
I mean, look, it's absolutely, and again, there's a formula for it, but it's not formulaic, right? There's a story I'll tell sort of maybe towards the end about some of this, but it's look, companies have to change things within their organization for all sorts of very good reasons. It's not that change isn't necessary. It's that a lot of the techniques we've historically used don't create the process, and there's an impatience for being able to wait for the outcome to happen. And so that's where I spend a lot of my time is sort of helping people understand. It's like doing a home renovation project. It's always going to take you longer than you expect, right? And I get it. You want to be done in a week. It's not going to take you a week. It's going to take you 3 weeks, a month, whatever it is. And so I spend a lot of time with companies helping them understand what's realistic and what you should expect. But that doesn't always. I always say there's no easy button to this, and I saw a lot of times, particularly my previous companies, again, good places, nothing wrong with anything we were doing, but it's sort of fun to sell the easy button, right? Oh, this isn't going to be hard. It's going to go smoothly. And it never does because we're people, right? This all sounds great until you put people in the equation, and then we do things that are complicated, right? So that's where I spend a lot of time helping companies understand reality and then kind of rise above it, right?
I think that's really crucial because in our society now, everything is so immediate, right? We're getting so many things so fast, and even on social media, like the buy-in for watching a 30-second video is like, oh, that's
Right.
long. Like I don't know. So our threshold for like our patience level is so low, and we
Yeah.
want these results immediately. And I even deal with it like talking to parents. They're like, oh, so they're not progressing fast enough or whatever. And I was like, you know what? If we stick to the program and they're doing the work,
Right.
and change hasn't happened in a year, then we can check in on this. But
Right.
like
Right.
you have to have like that patience. Like just
Yeah.
like you said, the middle is going to be kind of suck, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Middle
Yeah.
is
And
the
I
most painful part.
one of the big phrases I use is that progress is directional, not absolute, right? So
Oh, wow.
so
Yeah.
as long as I'm making progress, then I'm making progress, right? And that's why again, back to this measuring verbs instead of nouns is like, I always say to people when we'll do a workshop or something and I'm like, you have to do this again, right? It's like a workout. You don't go to the gym once, you're like, oh, I have to get up and do this again tomorrow. Yeah. And the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And so a lot of my coaching is sometimes just helping people understand what they're about to go through. And like you probably do, right? Helping people fight through the middle because that's where people give up.
Yeah.
I heard this stat, which was great. Uh, and it was from a friend of mine, Lauren Johnson. She had put it out, some study. And the stat was that most people give up on their New Year's resolution on January 19th. So that was 3 days ago. So it sort of gives you a sense of like, it takes repetition, and repetition is boring, and repetition is frustrating, and slow progress forces people to give up. And so, yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons we have jobs helping athletes do that, right?
That's crazy about the resolution. I'm not surprised at all though, because I've already talked to like 4 people who have
Yeah.
said they were gonna do dry January,
Right.
and we're like, I didn't. I'm like, what do you mean? Like the alcohol slipped into your mouth? Like what? Like how? But it's crazy
Yeah.
our tolerance to stay disciplined and
Well,
commit.
the challenge with that, yeah, I mean, I know that's a big thing, but the challenge with that is that we stack too many things together, right?
Mm,
I want to stop drinking. I want to run twice a week. I want to be a better parent. I want to be a better spouse. I want to read more. I want to sleep more. We stack 17 things on top of each other, and of course, you're going to give up on some of those. That's too
yeah,
many things. And
yeah,
back to this principle of creating focus is you can really only change a couple things at a time.
yep,
And so you've got to build until you transition something from an action that's very effortful, right? Change is takes effort, right? It's not a habit. I mean, by definition, a habit is something I don't think about, right? So I always say this to people: try brushing your teeth for 1 month with your opposite hand,
I
and
like it.
it's 2 minutes, right? And how quickly you get frustrated. And so,
Mm,
but if you did it enough, it would shift and become a habit, and then I could free up space for something else. And so again, it in my job, when I talk about helping people and companies with shifts, it's like, what do we need to change, and in what sequence should we begin changing them?
yeah,
And let's not change everything all at once. Let's
yeah.
just do a couple things. Let's have some wins and move to the next one. Um, so yeah,
Very practical. Do you know who Jim Quick is?
yeah,
Yeah, that because that's. I mean, he
yeah,
talks about brushing the
yeah.
teeth with the opposite hand. I love his stuff. I'm sure you listened to his book
I do.
Limits. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no. It's so interesting because again, I was listening to a Huberman Lab podcast, and some of this stuff was talking about motivation and this idea that um, motivation is a sort of a finite resource, right? And so you can replenish it and you can rebuild it. But one of the reasons we have such a high preference for habits is because we don't have to think about them, right? We don't have to put in any effort. And so when I want to change something, I actually have to move away from not thinking about it to thinking about it, and then do that repeatedly over a pretty long period of time. And that process for most people, particularly adults, is very frustrating, right?
Hmm.
And when we get frustrated and we have a different relationship with stress,
Yes.
we give up,
Yeah.
right? And we stop. So it's again, it's kind of why I have a job. So
Yeah. I mean, this is crazy how much of this stuff is aligning with athletics and
right,
teaching. Like yeah, I love that you're bringing that to the other, to the other world because I told a kid I was training yesterday. I said, don't get frustrated easily. I said when you
right.
get frustrated easily, you quit easily.
That's right.
And that's just what it is. And I remind myself of that. I was like, are you getting frustrated easily right now? Because that's
Right.
how you quit easy. That's how you quit quick because you're like, I'm frustrated this because I want the result fast.
Right.
It's a reflection
Right.
of my patience, right?
Right.
You're
Right.
frustrated because like I want to get it right away, first try.
Right.
I'm like, what? Who do I think I am? I'm that big of a deal that I'm going to get this first try.
Right.
And
Right.
sometimes it's like I got to relax a little bit and
Yeah.
realize it's going to take time to get the
Yeah.
result. So I
Yeah.
love that you're actually coaching that, in these on a really large scale because
Yeah. Yeah.
people,
And it's fun, and sort of to that point, it's fun because um my whether I'm on a field or whether I'm in a corporate setting, I get to just sort of be the same person. And I think one of the reasons I ventured out on my own was like, look, every company, you have things you have to do that maybe aren't aligned with, what you want to be focusing on, right? Not that they're good or bad. And so it's just great because I just get to do this all the time. And so it's really like the best time of my life. I mean, it's really, really
oh,
fantastic to kind of bring this all together.
I'm happy to hear that. Talk to me a little bit about your coaching on the field now. I want to know a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's one of the things that's getting harder and harder to do in terms of my time frame. So we're both from Folsom. This is the thing that we learned about each other.
So cool.
Yeah, yeah. So I played Division III college football many years ago, and have coached kind of youth sports for many years. I have a son now. He's My oldest daughter, I just saw her. She's 27. She played high school basketball. My son is 16, and he's a quarterback just like I was. My daughter's 11. She rides horses, which I don't know anything about, but I coach her up still. Um, but look, football was just such a fantastic experience for me. My teammates are my brothers. My coaches are like my parents. Every good thing I've learned about being a leader came from many of those experiences. And so, first and foremost, it was just a way to give back. And I just loved coaching little kids and kind of watching them grow, particularly at the young age, because kids make so much progress in those, kind of young, yeah, sort of time windows. And then, quite honestly, I'm still a competitive guy, right? I mean, I love being on the field. I love the chess match, particularly of coaching games,
Yeah.
and then I've sort of matriculated on. I coach at Folsom High School now. Folsom's one of the premier
Yep.
football programs in the United States, and my son was just out throwing for Florida State this morning. So he's, there's guys show up there, and they won state last year. We won state. I coached at the JV level. He and I are on in the same window, so I kind of move up and down over, and so I'm not coaching him directly. Um, but I'll do a lot of work in scouting and just being on the field, and also spending time with some of the younger coaches. A lot of them that don't maybe have some of the same life experiences. I'll coach the coaches up. But I just love being with athletes. I love coaching with them, particularly around the mindset piece of the game. And like so much of it at a young age is just about imposing your physical will. But I talk to them a lot about strategy. I talk to them a lot about how to set guys up for certain things, game planning. What are we trying to accomplish with a given play? Don't just perform the action, but understand where that action sits in the context of strategy. And it's just a great way to kind of level up their football IQ, which then gets you into thinking about being a leader and what does that mean? And right, how do I translate these skills outside of the field? Because most of them won't play football forever, right? So
Oh,
it's great. It's both a hobby. I guess it's my only hobby.
okay.
It's a hobby and a passion and an opportunity to give back. So
I love that. What do you think is one of the biggest gaps that younger coaches have that you notice that they need to be taught and that you've been able to help them with?
oh wow. This is doing these questions. I'm going to choose my words carefully. I think so. I'm a member of the Positive Coaching Alliance. I'm on their National Leadership Council. It's a nonprofit designed to improve the culture of youth sports in this country, and particularly for underprivileged kids who don't have access to high quality sports experiences. And so I pause on that question because on the one hand, you see young athletes that just need access and coaches that are willing to spend the time with them to create a program. That certainly is a gap of just, do we have willing people who are, want to spend the time? It takes a lot of time, right? And do they have the basics, right? Do they understand how to coach young people? And that's an important gap that we need to address. On the other side, if I were to take highly successful programs, certainly the pressure to win at this age for young kids is really high.
Yes.
And my own personal beef, I think the pressure to specialize in a given sport at a young age is really, really unfortunate.
Yes.
And so, you've got year-round athletes, right, that are going to camps and going to other things. And I think a lot of coaches feel the pressure to maintain those athletes in that system. My son plays quarterback and he also pitches, right? And so from about now, maybe a week or so out to the beginning of May, he won't touch a football again. And but it's made him, he's a pretty good hitter, and it's made his internal clock and his processing speed much better,
Yeah.
right? Because and so all the data shows that kids should be multi-sport athletes, and yet this industry of sort of coaching, I think, has made it hard for people sometimes
Yes.
to appreciate that a diversity of experiences is really critical for young athletes.
Yes. I couldn't agree more. And to piggyback off that, I think what I see often is parents
Yeah,
projecting what they wish they could have done or
sure.
had
Yeah.
onto their kids. And it's like year-round soccer. I know an 11-year-old that has like maybe 2 weeks off the year. Period. For soccer, only plays soccer, only that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, man, they're 11,
Yeah,
they're 11. I'm like, and the parents, I think it's sometimes they're projecting on the kid, like, oh, you have
yeah,
like we have to go to this.
yeah. What's the
Look,
pressure? You got to be able to start. You got to beat out so and so, and
yeah,
it does have a snowball effect in terms of that experience. Yeah,
yes, and even more so, I think it takes the fun out of it, and
yeah.
we don't learn as as quickly when we're not having fun versus when we are
That's
having
right.
fun. We
Right.
literally learn faster when we're having fun.
That's right. Yeah,
And we
yeah,
play. So that's I agree with that. And I think, the coaches and the parents both, have a role to play in that. And
yeah.
something I was also realizing is coaches, it's easy to be like, I have to coach elite players to be an elite coach.
Right,
And that's not true.
right.
But I realize all the good coaches are just wanting to go and leave and coach at the highest level. And I'm like, yeah, but what about the kids who didn't make the high school team, didn't make the club team?
Yeah,
Where are they going to go? Where are they going to sharpen their skills? And that's that
yeah,
I'm trying to close within my own space. Like,
yeah,
all right, let's have a program for those kinds of kids because,
yeah.
man, it's become so competitive and
Yeah, I will give the folks at the folks at Folsom High School just a great program, and we're very fortunate in a lot of ways. But the head varsity coach was the head football coach of the junior Pee Wee program for the 8-year-old team, right? And so they coach down and they're in the system, they're spending time. These guys don't get paid for that, right? And so they're really committed, and so we're very lucky. But any person who spends their time for free, coaching someone and giving back should be congratulated and rewarded and appreciated for the depth of time. And that is it's the basis for, this idea that it takes a village and coaches are essential. I can say one thing to my son and he'll be like, I'm not listening to you. A coach can say the exact same thing, and it's like that's the most genius thing in the world, right? So coaches play a critical role, and so I just think that those pressures can be, you've got folks that just don't have anything, and then folks that have a lot, and the pressure to win, and the pressure from parents. It's I've certainly learned a lot. I haven't always been my best in some of those moments,
yeah,
but it's a process for sure.
yeah, absolutely. Okay. I got a leadership question for you here. All right.
Yeah,
So you have a diverse leadership background. How do you tailor your coaching style to suit unique needs of different industries, right? So you work in a lot of leadership,
yeah,
but how do you approach like the high school football versus working with I saw some of the companies that you've worked with. I think one of them
yeah.
was like Airbnb or was it
Like I've a lot, like
so many.
Salesforce, Meta, DoorDash.
Oh, DoorDash. That's what I was
Yeah,
thinking of. That's what I
yeah,
was picturing. Yeah. So what does that look like? Kind of,
yeah.
or is it all kind of the same? I want to, yeah.
Well, I think there's a couple dimensions of that. So one is sort of style, right? Like your leadership style is something that you find over time that you develop. And some people can be more directive, some people are more facilitative. Certainly as a professional coach, meaning not an athletic coach, but going through a certification process, you're really heavily focused on what we call sort of coaching the person, not the problem, which
Mm,
is this idea of how do I help you through questions and insights to be able to understand your own process. Whereas if I'm in a real consulting capacity, they just want me to tell them what to do, right? And sort
yeah.
of like, tell me what I need to kind of go through the process of sort of doing. So I think part of that is understanding your style, like which do you um, lean into a little bit more in terms of how you show up, and then what does the situation call for, right? Do I need to be more around asking questions or being more around telling, right? I've always been a little bit of a troublemaker, so I will ask hard questions and try to shift and disrupt things. I do it to myself, so it's not like I'm asking someone to do something that I'm not willing to do on my own. But um, first of all, so that I think the first piece is sort of like, how do you like to show up, right? There's a big difference between Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick, right? But they're both great coaches, right? And they have a different style. So that's, I think, being authentic to you as a person is important to kind of know. And then there's the situation and what does that call for? I think the third thing I would say is that these are all just people. And so I have a process I talk about, which is called teach, demonstrate, practice, and apply.
Okay.
And so what that means is, as a coach, in whatever capacity, the first thing I need to do is teach you what we're trying to accomplish, right? What's the play? What's the strategy? What are we trying to do in this workshop? I need to teach that to you so you have context, to your point about the buy-in, right? Why are we here? What is this all about, right? The second thing I need to do is demonstrate that, right? In some way, shape, or form. So I need to give you a sense of what does good look like
Mm.
in this action, in this behavior. And then you need to practice it with my guidance and coaching, and I need to be giving you feedback in that process. And then you need to go apply it, right? So if I'm coaching a team, right, I'm the coach, I just call plays. So the purpose of a game week is we're going to teach you the game strategy. I'm going to demonstrate it. We're going to get on the whiteboard and you go here, he goes here, this happens here, like this is the play. You're gonna practice that, and I'm gonna coach you up. Hey, great job. No, you're in the wrong spot, whatever it is. And then when it comes time for the game, I stand on the sideline and you do the work.
Mm.
That is exactly the same process I can apply to a corporate team, right? Which is, all right, everybody, we're a C-suite team. We're having some behavior problems. We have a new strategy. We don't know how to put it into practice. All right, well, let me teach you what we need to do. Let's get on the whiteboard and demonstrate that. Let me give you some examples, and then you're going to go practice it with your teams, and I'm going to coach you up in the process. Hey, you shouldn't have said that. That was perfect. Do that again, right? You're going to go through that, and then they got to go run the business, right? So I just found that it was such an overlap in sort of process, right? That as long as you have people in your company, I can help you change, right? It's the same process.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. It's needed. The change, the leadership, it's all needed. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you highlight a specific success story where your coaching strategies resulted in significant performance improvement for a client or team?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we were talking about the power company that I've been working with. So, I mean, I won't give names, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure they wouldn't care, but because it's a great story. But so almost a year ago exactly, I have a business school a colleague that I went to school with, or classmate. He's now a senior vice president in this company, and he called me up, and he was seeing some of the stuff I was posting online about leadership, these conversations and everything. And I came out and talked to his team. And I actually shared with them those 6 principles that we were going over as you asked me about the neuroscience of change. And
Yeah.
so anyway, they liked the conversation, and they had one of their power plants was one of the most underperforming nuclear power plants in the nation. So if you know anything about nuclear power, there's about 100 nuclear power plants in the U.S., and there's a rating system for how those plants are gauged. And this was in the bottom, and it wasn't not safe, it just was not performing very well. And there's 16 different dimensions of how a power plant is scored.
Wow.
And there's this big process that goes through for that. And so they asked me to come in, and they said we need to change the culture of our organization, and we have about 18 months to be able to kind of turn this performance around, because 18 months from now we're going to go through this big rating again and go through this big refueling outage. It's very technical, but it doesn't really matter what it is. And so they asked me to help their leadership team. We took 40 people from 800 person station, and we put them through this process of like, all right, why are we here? What's the problem? What's holding us back, right? Why are we not progressing? What needs to shift? What needs to change? And then how do we go practice that and then go apply it? Kind of the teach, demonstrate, practice, and apply sort of structure. So we did that. It's about a 120-day program that we put them through. Very sort of rigorous, very hands-on, very coaching oriented. 50 people that then it sort of like, ripples out. And so 50 people became 100, became 150, became 200. So there's a lot of detail in there, but just in November, this plant got re-rated again. When they got rated the first time, of those 16 dimensions, only one of them was green. They got re-rated. This time around, only one of them was yellow. And for the first time in the history of the plant,
Wow.
10 of those areas were green for the first time ever. And they went from the bottom quartile of performance in the industry to in the top 10.
Wow.
So
That's
it's
incredible.
really, I mean, just truly really rewarding. And to be fair, though, they're the ones that did the work, right? I
Yes.
mean, the pride of a coach is watching other people accomplish great things,
Yes.
and you give them the feedback and experience to be able to help them. I always say my job is like kind of building a sandbox for other people to build their sandcastle in.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't be more proud. It's such a
Wow.
wonderful story, and they're just good
Incredible.
humans, good people. But yeah, and this just happened, so it's really kind of fresh, and
Amazing.
we're riding off of that win for sure.
Yeah. So if there was only one single piece of it, like of advice that you could have them apply and say you couldn't have worked with them, but you saw the results that you did get, like what is the biggest thing you would say, just focus on this one thing that I taught that you were.
Wow, that's a really good question. I think the answer I've given them, which is, and this is true of people, is that we own what we create, right?
Mhm.
And what that means is when I come up with the idea of what's important to me and what I need to change, I'm far more attached to it than if somebody else gives me the answer. And so embracing the struggle of that journey of figuring out what needs to be different, why am I part of that problem? And then how do I shift that? For them, that's really the secret is people have to arrive at these conclusions on their own. And when they do, it's far more powerful than if I just tell you what to do, right? And so that's really it, is this idea that we own what we create and that they were reflective. They understood how they contributed to the problem, but how they were also the solution. And then they repeated it over and over and over again. It's so funny. We had this workshop and there was about 50 people in there. And I said, look, if everybody leaves this room and talks to 3 people in the next week, that's 150. And if you do that 3 more times, that's 750. You do the math, it kind of rolls out. Within a month, everyone in this plant could have talked to, listened to, interacted with someone who's on a journey of personal transformation. And before you know it, everyone will be on that journey. And that's what they did. And it snowballed into this huge movement. And I always say to people, don't create a program, create a movement. And when you create a movement that's fueled with emotion and inspiration, people will do amazing things, right? And so, I mean, you look at Dan Campbell and the Lions, right? Last year they were the laughing stock until the last. And now it's like it's all about leadership, right? It's all about believing. It's all about. Now I'm a Niner fan, so let's see what happens next week. But I respect it, right? I mean, I really respect what's sort of happening there. So, yeah, they've just done a great job, and I think you've got to really trust the process, and they did it, and it's a great story, and I'm super proud of them.
That's incredible. Yeah. Create a movement. Create a movement. Then we need more leaders creating more movements.
That's right.
Makes
That's
the world.
exactly right. That's why I do what I do.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for hopping on. This was incredible. I really enjoyed having you, and I think a lot of people will also enjoy this podcast for
I
sure.
appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I'm so glad we met. Go Folsom,
Yes.
and
Thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, I would greatly appreciate if you could share this episode with 5 people you think could benefit from the show. Also, please feel free to connect with me on Instagram at izzychinche or my website at izzychinche.com. Thank you so much for being you. Keep being a leader and making this world a better place.